So in this episode, we're gonna do an install that I've wanted to do for a really long time, and that is a set of air jacks. These things are super cool. It's gonna be so much fun to have these at the racetrack, lift the car up and down, change tires. It's gonna make a lot of stuff way easier. So let's go ahead and get these installed, plus a set of seat rails from Watson in this video. All right, let's jump in. All right, really excited here. We got the air jacks. These are done by Yellow Speed Racing. From my understanding, they're made out of Taiwan. And then Yellow Speed Racing, they have an American website that's who I purchased from. This whole kit was about $1,500. So, and that includes the air lamps and all that stuff. So that's a good $1,000 cheaper than most of the other options I was looking at. So this seems like a pretty good option. The parts, while not the absolute top quality, the best you could possibly find, I see no indication that they're bad. They'll probably be more than adequate for this more grassroots racing focus. I'm super excited to see what they're like. So to mount these to the car, we have these tubes here that we need to weld to the car. Unfortunately for me, I don't have any way to just weld just this to the car. There's no spot or anything like that. So I'm going to be needing to make some mounts to weld this in a couple of different areas, which I'm going to jump into now. All right, let's take a look. All right, so for the front here, I'm following what's done on the GT4 Mustangs, where we mount it right here. I'll take you over there to the other side to show you the clearance. But essentially, because I need a little bit of a spacer, because I need a little bit of a spacer for those rings that hold the air jack in this tube and allow you to adjust it, I'm using these existing bolts that normally I would just take out and remove entirely, but I'm going to use these bolts as a spacer and weld initially weld it to those bolts, with some tack welds, and then I'm going to build some things that hold it on each side, just like on the GT4 Mustang. All right, so this is the wheel liner. Yeah, wheel well liner, and as you can see, there's a little bit of space back here. This gives us, if we put it here, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this with only two hands, but it just barely clears. It might interrupt with this a little bit, but this is, where the ones on the GT4's cars are. I've already done the measurements. There's plenty of room. I think you have something like, if I remember right, it was 3.5 inches between here and where the tires pass through, and these are 2.75 inches as I measure. So we'll have plenty of room. It'll be a little bit of a tight fit, but nothing too crazy. All right, so I got started here by attaching this tube to these two bolts here that I mentioned in the previous video. Grind them clean, tack weld it up. This gives me something to hold everything in place and make sure that I'm square. It also pulls it away from the body so I can get a collar on that's on the actual air jack so I can spin the collar on. Just need a little bit of clearance. So then what I did is I prepped these tubes, I cleaned them up, and I got basically just flat stock strips. I think it was 1/8 inch steel that I used to attach these to the car and reinforce to the body. All right, so here's what we're looking like. Got the flat stock tacked on all four corners, and then tacked again on all four corners. Pretty happy with how simple this is, and it should be more than capable of handling the stress put on this corner by the air jack. So what I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup here, and then I'm going to go ahead and test the air jack in this slot as is, just to make sure it goes in and out. Everything's fine there. And then I'm going to go ahead and start to weld this. I'm probably going to weld this section in multiple runs here, where I kind of work in pieces and work around it, because I don't want to put too much heat into it and warp it and then make it so that the air jack itself doesn't go in and out of the tube. So, but I'm going to go ahead and test fit this real quick just to see what it's like, see how it works, and then we'll come back and come back in and fully weld it in. So I actually ended up welding the passenger side first, but I did exactly what I said, which is I just worked in 1 inch increments and kind of left, would weld 1 inch and then skip an inch, then weld another inch, then skip an inch, and kind of worked my way down, then over the other side and then back up. And this kept me from putting too much heat into it. Worked great, really happy with how the welds came out. All right, so pretty happy with how this came out. I started with some stitch welding on the back here. Just doing it in pieces, and I ended up going just kind of all the way down in one go. Super solid. Did a test fit with the air jack and stuff, and it worked great. No issues with the air jack getting in and out of there, which is awesome. welds are nice and solid. You know, this isn't going anywhere. It's definitely held in there pretty good. So this came out great. Let's go ahead and move on to the back. All right, so for the rears, we're gonna mount these from the inside of the car. This is a super simple area. The GT4 car puts them way in the corner, like really, really tucked in, I think probably about right there. A couple of things with that I'm not a huge fan of. One, I can't get mine that close to the edge there because of that, you know, that collar that I need to tighten down. And two, if we go underneath the car, all right, so this general area right between my two fingers is where that would go if I welded it up against the side of the car. I'm not a huge fan how it interacts with this plate. It's a little bit messy. It doesn't give me a lot of room to reinforce. So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna put mine a little further out, and that allows me to weld a plate to it. And I'm actually gonna drill this embossed area out and then put a little bit of a little oversized 1/8 inch steel plate under here that I weld to the bottom of the car, and that'll reinforce down here and then up there. So as we can see here, we're gonna drill that out. And then in here, this gives me, you know, it's a little further away from things than I would like, but between being welded to the floor, a reinforced floor, I'm then gonna build a bracket that comes off here and holds it. That'll be more than stable enough. It'll keep it from moving around, gives us a ton of flexibility. I don't know yet whether it'll come from back here or over here. I'll probably measure the distance. It might be over there. But either way, I'm gonna reinforce from one of the sides here, and that should give it plenty of stability and reinforcement so that it doesn't move around. All right, I got started by cutting holes in the floor using my template here to make sure I could get clean holes. And then I took my template over to a piece of flat stock here on my vise. This is just 1/8 inch plate that I've cut into a 5x5 square, cut a hole into. This will be what reinforces the floor. And then I moved on to the reinforcement gussets, if you will, that go inside the car. I cut these out of a 3-inch piece of flat stock I had, so basically it was just a flat piece, and then I reinforced it with two little triangle pieces that were a diagonal. I then moved into the inside of the car and prepped all the metal here so that I was welding to a nice clean surface. It doesn't look clean, but I promise you it is nice and clean. There's no primer, no paint, nothing like that I'm welding to. Welding straight to the metal. Once I got everything square, I tacked it up. I then went and got a second gusset that I made for additional strength, then welded both of these all the way around, did the full finish welding to make sure everything was fully welded together, and then I went ahead and went underneath here. And I did this by doing a whole bunch of tacks to give myself a good base, and then I went around and did a finished weld. All right, so this is where I ended up. Definitely not the best I've ever welded, but this was a lot harder than I expected. So I should have expected that this would be pretty hard, but this is really, really thin. But the harder part wasn't how thin it was, it's the fact that it's double layered. You can see right here, this part's double layered. And so that means there's a lot of slag and other crap and just junk between these seams that you can't clear out. So it was blowing through really bad if I tried to put any heat into it. So basically what I did is I went down and did a tack like I was working on sheet metal. So just tack, 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 tack all the way around, filled every single gap between this metal and the floor with a tack, and then I could go in and lay a pretty decent bead. You know, this is it's a little bulkier than I would have wanted, but there's a lot of weld here just due to the nature of the fact I had to layer so much of it up. It's probably a little colder than it needed to be. This to me looks like I could have thrown a little more heat into it. But either way, this is definitely, as we saw with me doing two up top, that's where the real structure is coming from. I'm not too worried. We have 3 points now in the rear where these are held up. They're definitely not going to fail on us. So pretty happy with how those turned out overall. A little bit ugly, but not too bad. All right, so here we go. Here's what it looks like inside the car. Not the prettiest thing I've ever done, but it's highly effective. As you saw in the time lapse, I ended up with going 2 supports inside the car just for some extra structural rigidity due to how hard it was to weld that plate to the floor. So this came in afterwards, but I think it came out pretty good. All right, so here are the Welding Watson seat mounts, I think is what they're called, or seat mount rails, something like that. Basically, we weld these into the car, and they give a nice pattern to bolt these side mount seat mounts to. So these bolt into the side of your race seat, like this guy over here, and then they need to bolt into the floor. The problem is the stock bolt pattern is for you know, obviously the stock seat. So, you know, the bolt here doesn't line up with the bolt back there. So you need to, you know, come up with something that allows it to work. I've used in the past something like this guy, which is a planted seat adapter or seat base. I can't remember what it's called either. But basically, this guy here allows me to, that bolts into the floor, and then these side mount brackets for the seat bolt into that. It's a little clumsy. There are a lot of bolts involved, and you know that weighs more than it needs to, and it's just unneeded, you know, complexity, and it lifts the seats higher off the floor than needed. So what I'm doing is I'm going to reduce the amount of bolts used by welding what essentially that does with those directly to the floor. That will help ensure that, you know, the seat's even more planted. It'll allow me to lower the seat further into the car, which is great to get your head away from the cage and the roof. So that's my goal. I've already mocked one up on the side here just to kind of see how the bolts line up. But we're going to go ahead and I actually have new side brackets coming that will fit a little bit better, the ones I actually plan to use in this car. So once I get those here tomorrow, going to jump in and we're going to mount them here, and then we're going to start to see how they work in the car. All right, I'll pick this back up tomorrow once we get the brackets in. All right, so these Watson separate seat rails, seat mount, whatever we want to call them. Let's take a look at these guys. So the way these mount is you attach them to the side mounts of your seat, like I have over there, which I'll go in just a second, and then you weld them. You tack them in place, then fully weld them in place, and then that's what you bolt the seat to, rather than any type of adapter plate like I showed previously. All right, so I've gone ahead and mounted the first set here to the bottom of my seat. As we can see, we got the Sparco side mount seat mount on this circuit seat, and I've centered the seat in the middle of the factory rails there down at the bottom. So there needs to be fitment here. I can't just tack these in as place. It's really hard. It'll probably be pretty hard to see, but if we look, the nuts that I screw into are actually resting on the seat rail. So we actually need to go in and cut holes here that these nuts can slide into. So what I've gone ahead is I've put this in place, and then I'm going to use this marker here to kind of outline where things go and where I need to clearance this factory seat rail so that I can drop it all the way down, because we want this to be resting. We want this little lip here to be resting on this so that I can then weld it directly to here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, pull the seat out, we'll clearance it, then we'll reinstall and see how we did. All right, so I broke out the good old carbide bit on the grinder here, opened up some holes here in the back, and then for the front, I started with the drill bit, and then I moved to the carbide bit and grinder after I realized that I just couldn't quite get enough room here. I ended up going and taking what was 2 holes per side and just making it one bigger hole per side. This gave me the room I needed to, kind of move things around and get a little bit of adjustment to get the perfect fit. Once I got that perfect fit, or what I felt was good, I tested with an individual one. It was good. I then moved on to tacking. I'm using footage from working on the passenger side, but once I tacked the seat rails in, I then removed the seat and the Sparco mounts off, and that allowed me to get access to welding the full piece here. And I basically just welded anything that was metal, that anywhere it connected, to solid metal of the car, I welded it. So that was around the 3 sides on the front, the 3 sides on the back, and then some of the supports as they run down towards the floor. So I welded everything I could. All right, so this is how it came out. Now that we're done, fully welded up, I thought it came out pretty good. I got it welded up in the front here as well, down by the floor. Got it welded up here in the rear. I had to add a little bit of a height to this back here, just because, as you can see on that side, it all lined up on the higher piece, not this lower piece. The back here, or on the outside here, we were mostly off this higher piece. So what I ended up doing was cutting 2 squares or rectangulars. I think it was 1/4 inch is what I cut, and then I welded one, stacked another one on top of it, welded that one, and then welded this to that. That got it basically one solid piece. There's quite a bit of weld there, but it's definitely not going to move, so pretty happy with how that turned out. All right, so that's gonna do it for this video. I'm pretty excited. I thought those came out pretty good. Sorry I can't give you like a full shot of, you know, the car coming up off the ground, but unfortunately, you know, due to the fact I still have to paint the car and go through all that, I don't wanna run the air hoses, which will be hard lines and all that kind of stuff, and until I've, you know, painted the car and I'm starting to like reinstall the interior, because you know, it's gonna be a fair amount of work working around stuff. So we'll be tackling that in a future video. But thanks for, you know, watching this one. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up on Instagram or YouTube, you know, the usual stuff. And if in the next video, I think we'll be going over the fuel cell. So fuel cell's going in the trunk. We're gonna do a, you know, like a bulkhead fitting and then build a little cage for it and then drop the fuel cell into that. So that'll be good. That'll be the next video. And then after that, we'll probably do the dry sump oil tank, which came in this week. Really nice unit. Super excited for that. All right, I'll catch you in the next one.